Well, good afternoon. I'm pleased to welcome you to this discussion on Nordic Security Redrawn. As you've just heard, my name is Matthew Kroenig. I'm Vice President and Senior Director of the Atlantic Council's Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security. As we all know, NATO has two new members, Finland and Sweden, bringing the NATO alliance to 32 countries. It also means that now every Arctic country except for Russia is a member of NATO. So to dive into some of the challenges and opportunities presented by this new Nordic security landscape, I'm honored to introduce some distinguished panelists. So starting all the way at the end here, we have Minister of Defense of the Republic of Finland, Antti Hakonen. Welcome. Next, we have Minister of Defense of Norway, Born Arild Gram. Welcome. Next, we have Minister of Foreign Affairs of Iceland, Thordis Kolbrún Rayford Gylfadóttir. Welcome. And then next, Minister of Defense of the Kingdom of Sweden, Paul Johnson. And last but not least, to my immediate left, Minister of Defense of Canada, Bill Blair. So, Your Excellencies, welcome to the NATO Public Forum. And we have 5 ministers and only about 35 minutes, so I think we want to jump into it. And so let me ask the first question, and Minister Johnson, you're the rookie here, so maybe I'll start with you. You know, some Americans might say, well, additional countries in NATO, aren't these just additional countries we need to defend? Why is NATO stronger with Sweden in the alliance?
Sure, and thank you for that question, and also thank you for having me on with a great panel. We interact a lot, and I think there's many things that unite us around this panel as well. But just a few things then on Swedish NATO membership. I'll start with geography. Sweden, of course, being located at the heart of the Nordic region, meaning that when we're inside the alliance now, we're going to be an important staging and basing area for assuring that NATO can deter and defend the Baltic states and Finland. We just ratified in the Swedish Parliament the DCA with the United States, meaning that the US also will have the possibility, for example, for basing military equipment in Sweden. So that's important also for the alliance as such in its ability to deter and defend. And then, of course, there's capabilities we bring to the table. We have been operating for many decades in the Baltic Sea with our submarines, with our surface combatant Visby-class corvettes, and in the air with our air surveillance plane and our intelligence planes. So we know the Baltic Sea inside out, we like to think. Yes, as the other countries on the panel, we also have good Arctic capabilities. I always say there's one thing to be able to survive in that cold weather up in the north, but another to fight, and our soldiers know how to do that. We also, for being a smaller country, we have a quite strong defense industrial base, since there's no other country in the world of 10 million who can produce fighter aircraft, submarines, advanced surface combatant artillery systems, and IFSWs. And we score quite well on innovation, both military innovation and civil innovation. So we are also enthusiastic about joining Diana and the NATO Investment Fund as well. So that are a few things that we can bring to the table. And in the end, I think Sweden is safer and NATO is stronger by having us inside.
Many impressive strengths indeed. And let's go to Finland next. And Minister Hakonen, same question to you. Why is NATO stronger with Finland as a member?
Well, I think that when there's a situation that the most of the democracies belong to NATO, NATO is stronger in that case. That's why that's the one point. Like we see that the world is going dividing to autocrat countries, and they are playing even stronger together, and that's why democracies must play also together. That's the main big issue. But what Finland brings to NATO. For example, we have decades built our own defense. Neighboring Russia, we have thought that we have to manage by ourselves. That's why we have almost, I think, the highest number of will to defend the country, over 80%, and 90% of our people also say that they are willing to defend NATO allies. Now, this is the recent newest poll. We have a large reservist army. We have almost 900,000 citizens who are military trained, wartime strength almost 300,000. We have old traditional warfare capabilities, but also new highly valuable capabilities. We have almost largest artillery in Western Europe. we have kind of been prepared for that kind of conventional warfare what Russia is now waging in Ukraine, because we have true intelligence, watch it really closely what Russia is doing. That's why end of the Cold War we didn't let our guards down. We kept our large reservist army, large artillery, large land forces, and now we are also purchasing new high-tech capabilities, F-35s, and developing our army with heavy investing programs, 2.4% last year. And now it's a new thing for us to do a close cooperation with all our allies. We have done it closely with the Nordic countries, with several partners in JEF cooperation, and with United States for decades. But still, Article 5, that's a new thing for us. And last year, when we joined to NATO, everything has gone smoothly. We have been integrated really fast to NATO, to our kind of a common defense system. And that's why we are really happy to see the results from this summit. We are taking a stronger stance with the collective defense, and also the Finnish integration into collective defense has been really smooth.
Wonderful, thanks very much. And I should note that you're going to have to leave us a little bit early, so if he walks off stage, I didn't offend him, he has somewhere else to be. But Minister Graham, let's maybe come up to you next. A lot of focus on NATO's eastern flank, the war in Ukraine for obvious reasons, but Norway's often been oriented to the high north, and of course there's increased geopolitical competition in the Arctic. Tell us a little bit about why we should be focused on the security challenges in the high north. Why could a conflict with Russia escalate into the high north? How should we be thinking about this?
You know, we have a border with Russia. We have never been in conflict with Russia, but we see their will to use force against another peaceful neighbor of them. And Russia is always the point of interest when we think of our defense planning. And just a few miles across the border, we have one of the world's non-Western largest nuclear bases. Russia has their much of their strategic nuclear weapons, nuclear submarines and so on the Kola Peninsula, just across the border. And this basing complex increases in importance for Russia these days. Much of their conventional forces on the land has been sent to Ukraine, and they are depleted there. They are killed, but they have most of their nuclear forces, their submarines, their airplanes intact. And with the difficulties they face in the Black Sea with their naval forces, the Baltic Sea is more of a NATO lake, you could say. Then the Northern Fleet and their basing in the Kola Peninsula is even more important for them. They, of course, want to defend and protect these capabilities. So for us, it's very important to have situational awareness, to have presence in the high north, follow the activity. This was also a very important part. We had just presented and had a unanimous support in Parliament for our new long-term defense plan. Increasing the situational awareness when it comes to the space domain, to maritime surveillance, intelligence, to being more present with the naval forces and so on. I think this is a very important part of the deterrence. We want predictability and stability in the high north. We welcome more allied activity also in the high north. At the same time, we want to calibrate this and as I said, have a stability and predictability. So this is important for us. We also watch closely what kind of development we see with the Russian and Chinese cooperation in the high north. We have Chinese researchers on the Svalbard Islands, the far north. So we have to watch this closely. But can I also say, because you asked the importance of Sweden and Finland joining NATO, I think this is a huge thing for us as well. Of course, for Sweden and Finland, this is a huge step. I mean, Sweden, more than 200 years, neutral or alliance-free. But also for us, this is a huge development. You know, being able to see all the Nordic geography, the whole of the Scandinavian peninsula, when it comes to defense planning, to operational cooperation. We have been used to be, for the first time, we have a border with a land border with a NATO ally. That was when Finland joined last year. Trusted ally. and now we have this Nordic defense cooperation. We see so many possibilities in all domains, in all areas, when it comes to defense planning and defense capabilities. So this really opens a new world, and it happened really. There were some hiccups when it came to the ratification process, but still it happened really fast. So we don't have all the answers yet, but we see there is a lot of possibilities to strengthen the northern part of the alliance.
Minister Gylfadóttir, let's come to you next. And Iceland is a unique and special country in many ways. One of the ways it's unique is that it doesn't have standing armed forces. So given that, how does Iceland contribute to NATO's security?
Yes, thank you. I need 2 mics for some reason. I'm sorry. First of all, you know, Iceland is a founding member of NATO, 1 out of 12, and our contribution is partly, you know, literally our strategic location. Being in the middle of Europe and North America, our presence and us being a member of NATO is, of course, a cornerstone of our national security policy, and it has been for all these decades, 75 years, but it's also a contribution to the region. We have radar stations around the island, which feeds NATO, you know, information 24/7. We have Keflavik Air Base, where, of course, the United States was there up until 2006. We took it over. We have host nation support. So when friends and allies are operating and doing all kinds of, you know, air policing and practicing and etc. And we have from the US submarine surveillance, which again, with the increased capable of mobility from Iceland, it's not only a question whether it makes us safer in Iceland, but what does it mean for the region? What's our contribution in that regard? And I have to add a point on Finland and Sweden's membership. It truly, you know, it truly matters tremendously, both, of course, for Sweden and Finland, but also for the region. And not only the Nordics, the same goes with the Baltic states, the region itself, and for NATO. And of course, what these countries bring to the table, I mean, it's tremendous. And that's why it has gone smoothly, because of course we've been close partners and the integration has been very strong, but also as countries, because NATO is not only about tanks and weapons. You know, it was founded to cherish and protect democracy, individual freedoms, and the rule of law. And to have 2 members, you know, that rank the highest in that regard, with such a big, huge resilience and strong societies, that really makes NATO stronger, without a doubt.
Wonderful. Well, Minister Blair, let's continue on this theme with you. And so how does Finland and Sweden joining the alliance change the Nordic security situation? It makes the Baltic Sea a NATO lake, but closer to home for Canada, it means that now all Arctic countries other than Russia are NATO members. How does that change the situation when it comes to Arctic security?
I believe it's hugely beneficial, and frankly, it has brought to my country a renewed focus on some of our responsibilities. And you know, for the last 150 years and plus, my country has been blessed by extraordinary geography. We're surrounded by 3 oceans, one of which has been mostly frozen. We also live next door to a great superpower, a benign and supportive ally and friend. And so almost for our entire history, Canada has not been invaded, but we have a very significant armed forces, and all of our work for the last century and a half has been primarily expeditionary. We have fought in almost every war, but not in our own country. But there's been an acknowledgement. The world has changed. And I think we've seen certain evidence of that with Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. But we're also seeing through such impacts of new technologies, and in particular with climate change. Our Arctic is becoming far more accessible. The high north is actually being impacted by climate change at 4 times the global average. And what we're seeing is the melting of the permafrost, but also new accessibility in the Arctic. And we estimate that if we continue on the same path, and hopefully we won't, but if we do continue on the same path, by 2050, the Arctic Ocean could be the primary point of transit between Europe and Asia. And as it becomes more accessible, security concerns become, I think, far more significant to us. And so what we have observed, certainly in our own country, between Alaska, and the Americans, I think, do an outstanding job of providing security for the Beaufort and the Bering Sea. They're right across from the eastern shores of Russia. But between Alaska and Norway, frankly, there was not anywhere near as much work done there. There are huge gaps in our security and in our presence. I believe with the advent now of Finland and Sweden joining Norway, Iceland, and I would include Denmark and the United States, of course, in that relationship, we have now got a united NATO presence from Russia's eastern shore to their western shore. And I think we have much to learn from each other, the opportunity to work together. In my country, we're investing very significantly now in new capabilities in our high north, building multi-mission, multi-use infrastructure up there, investing in new technologies. We're investing very significantly in over-the-horizon radar and over-the-polar radar to improve our domain awareness. But we believe that there's great opportunity to learn from our new allies. And we have always been friends, and we have always worked well together. But through the alliance of NATO, I think we are strengthened by it. And one of the things, the final thing I would observe as well, that since February of 2022, NATO has transformed itself into a more powerful alliance. Everyone, I see a greater unity, a greater resolve, a greater focus of purpose. And I think that strength and that unity can be applied in all domains of risk, including potentially in the high north and in the Arctic.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, you talked about investments, so let's pick up there. One of the major themes, of course, of the summit is deterrence and defense. We have new regional plans. We need to get the capabilities to make sure those plans can be implemented. And so part of that is burden sharing and making sure all allies are contributing. Some of the countries here are at 2%, some not there yet. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about burden sharing. For those of you who are already at 2%, what is your strategy for staying there? What are the capabilities you're going to provide? And for those of you who aren't there yet, what is your strategy for getting there? And I'll throw that open to the group.
If I may start, because I'm one of the larger economies in the NATO alliance. We have the 6th largest military even today. But we are not at 2%, and we've got work to do to get there. One of the great challenges I think we're all facing is first of all, issues around personnel, and there's things that I've been learning from the Swedes and the Finns that are going to help me solve some of my challenges. But what we're seeing in production is also deterrence. And what we're finding is some real challenges in military production. And even, I've signed contracts for almost 200 planes for my Air Force just in the past year. But it's going to take a number of years to deliver those capabilities. We're building new surface combatant ships, 15 of them in our country. But I won't see the first one until 2032, and we won't be able to deliver them all until 2050. And so I think we also, I'm absolutely committed. Canada has to do more, and Canada will do more, and we'll meet the 2% pledge. And I think we have to even go beyond that 2% pledge. But having said all that, I think it's also incumbent upon us to make sure that we invest well. And part of the unity of NATO, I think, creates opportunity for us. Just earlier today, I entered into an agreement with Norway and Germany because we have agreed to work together on issues around production and meeting those targets so that we can go back to our respective constituencies and say, yes, we're doing what is required. We're going to invest the money that we need to invest, but we're going to do it well. And then we're going to create real value. And by working together, I think we're much better than working apart.
Looks like some others wanted to come in. Minister Johnson, please.
Sure. We increased our defense budget with 28% this year after decades of underinvestment, and we doubled our defense investment during these last 5 years, and we are at 2.2%. But 2.2 doesn't get us very far. We're going to get new capability targets already this fall, and which are going to be demanding because we know we will have deficiencies all across the alliance when it comes to air defense, when it comes to available ground forces, focusing on enablement, autonomous systems, and so forth. So 2% is certainly a floor, but it's not the ceiling, and we are going to be investing heavily also. We have a trajectory up to 2.6 by 2028. Now, that's one of the challenges. The other one is the defense industrial base. And in all honesty, right now in Europe, we have a defense industrial base that's shaped for peacetime situation. And then we look at the war in Ukraine. And the war in Ukraine is a war of attrition, i.e. a war of warehouses. So I think there's lots of things we need to do in order to ramp up industrial production. That means spending more and spending more together, meaning placing large orders. There's going to be a demand signal for the industry so they also can beef up their production. Because right now we're challenging with increasing prices at the same time as the lead time for us to get the platforms and systems is very long. Before, if you would ask us a decade ago, we would say there would be very little money, but lots of time, because people didn't think there would be a war. And now there's much more money, about 100 billion, and of course 23 allies now being at 2% or more, but there's little time because due to Russia's behavior, its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, its propensity to use military force, its low, and the fact that it take political and military risks and so forth. So I think there's a sense of urgency within the alliance, and we need to more also on the industrial side.
Mm-hmm. Minister Graham, please.
First we have to acknowledge that the last decade, the defense spending between the NATO allies has increased year by year, every year. That's a good development, and I'm also very happy that on 23 countries now reaching 2%, and I'm happy that we are one of them this year, past 2%, and with our new defense plan, I think we're almost going to double our defense budget and move towards 3% in a few years. And what do we do with all that money? Well, we strengthen really all our armed forces, from 1 to 3 brigades in the army, the home guard, more than doubling the air defense. But the main effort will be when it comes to the maritime sector. And we are a coastal maritime nation. Norway is geographically quite big land, not so much people, but we have 7 times the land area at sea, with huge resources, energy, fisheries, lines of communication and so on. It's so important to protect this, to be present, as I said earlier, follow the development, have situational awareness. So we are these new submarines, new frigates, renewing most of the Coast Guard and other surface vessel as well, having new satellites for surveillance, long-range maritime drones, and so on and so on. This is absolutely necessary, but we are also worried that it takes time, and Paul mentioned, you both mentioned production capacity and what can the industry deliver, and so that is also we have to focus even more on that, and it's a topic on this summit that's very important. We see also what can we do together in the Nordics, but also with other close allies to see how we can enhance production capacity and procure more together. That's an important part of the answer to that, I think.
Minister Hakkinen, it looks like you had your hand up as well.
I just shortly say that before we joined NATO, we had this kind of almost 10-year period, planning period in the national defense, that we were assessing first the threat analysis from Russia and our 1,300-kilometer border with Russian military plannings, and we would compare that what kind of military planning should we also have with capabilities, and how large reservist army we need. And those were kind of the requirements to kind of put the size on how our national defense should be planned. Now we are trusting that that the SACEUR will do the planning as overall planning. And now when we are seeing the threat analysis with Russia, with their ever-deepening partnerships with China, Iran, North Korea and other countries, we are seeing that this defense spending is not going to be enough. 2% is not going to be enough. Like Paul said, it's going to be a floor, but where's the ceiling? I don't know. During the Cold War, it was 3 to 4% in Europe, the spending rate. Is it something like that? I don't want any news now, but it's much higher. If we are looking where the world is going, and do we want to keep our defense in good shape, but even the deterrence, which is even more important, that Russia is taking huge risks. And that's why the deterrence is also a big question. And we know that even though we have invested heavily in our defense for decades, we need a lot of more money to build up these new capabilities, what comes from NATO also. But I think it's much more cheaper than to let them kind of off the list. That's why the Finnish people are trusting that the NATO capability targets are kind of planned wisely, and the money which we use to the NATO capability targets, it's wisely used money. And together we need a lot of these, what Paul and others said here, that joint procurements and cooperation with EU and cooperation with transatlantic industry. And there's a lot of good things going on now.
Yeah. Well, you said the 2% may not be enough, and in fact I was talking to one defense official recently who said according to their internal calculations, to get the capabilities needed to implement the regional plans, it might take something more like 3.6% across the alliance to get there. So I think maybe we all have to do more, maybe even in the United States. Roger Wicker calling for a major increase in the US defense budget. So I think we all can do more. You mentioned your long border with Russia, and of course a lot of focus on the Russia's conventional threat, but there's also the hybrid threat, the disinformation, the cyber attacks. Because of that, a lot of focus in the alliance on resilience. And at the Atlantic Council, we're setting up a new national security resilience initiative, so I'm very interested in this. But I guess maybe we'll start with you, but open it to the group. You have a lot of experience with resilience, your total defense concept. What are the lessons the rest of the alliance needs to learn about dealing with these Russian hybrid threats and how we can be more resilient?
Well, first of all, we have a long history with Russia after the Second World War. They have used during the Cold War all their tools and means in this broad spectrum influence or hybrid influence, what do you call it? With all means, and now we are just seeing that they are using, they are doing the same thing, hybrid warfare or hybrid influencing with these new modern age tools. The first thing is that we have in Finland this comprehensive security model, where we have kind of participated all our civil sectors and private companies to kind of what's the overall security situation in the society, and all those sectors have a role to support also the defense. And that's a good way to kind of also watch the hybrid influencing what Russia is doing. For example, now we are watching much more tighter restrictions to Russian real estate ownership, migration flows in the border control. Now there's a stricter law also coming to that, critical infra and those. We have done a lot for last decades, but now we are seeing that Russia is finding new tools. For example, migration is a new tool, and tackling also in the cyberspace some new measurements. That's why we have to run fast and do a closer cooperation between NATO countries.
Others want to jump in on resilience? Maybe you, Minister Johnson. I know you have a new national security strategy just out with resilience as a major concept.
Sure, we launched it on Monday actually, and I think, what do you should think this about resilience, and this is not an issue I'll be able to solve at the Ministry of Defense, and not even at the Ministry of Justice. So this is a whole of government, but even better, a whole of society approach, I think is really important. I mean, there's various forms, and we see that Russia is stepping up when it comes to activities such as cyber attacks, disinformation, cyber espionage, foreign direct investment into critical infrastructure. So build a whole of society endeavor, making sure you have good interagency cooperation, making sure your security services are working well with the police and the military intelligence, I think is really, really crucial to it. Good private-public partnerships is crucial. A lot of the critical infrastructure right now, being at least in Sweden, being it in energy, banking, telecom, it's in the hands of the private operators. And of course, they are also exposed to a lot of hybrid activities, and then we have to be able to share intelligence going two ways, and enhancing our resilience in that regard as well, I think is really crucial.
Okay, great. Minister Gylfadóttir, you wanted to come in on resilience.
Yeah, just to add some points, because I think societal trust and national resilience, information sharing, and political unity are probably the most important issues to counterattack that. And we have increased the cooperation and information sharing a lot, and I think we need to do even more, because what we're seeing as well as it's really important to look at it holistically. There's a pattern there, and we're being tested, and we have to have the overview of what is really happening, and we also have to have honest conversation with our peoples about what is happening. Both because it shows the development, it shows that what is truly at stake, because we're always saying, we're being tested, they're gonna test, but still a lot of people think it's quite far away from them. And I know that from my own country, for example. And we see the development, and we need to do the information sharing between friends and allies, but we also have to have an honest discussion with our people. And the other reason why we have to do that is because we need resilience within the society to counterattack that. So people always also have to be vigilant. And we need, we have misinformation, disinformation, and then, way more serious hybrid warfare. But we need to be more on the same page, because it also takes time for individuals to digest new reality, which is darker than it was, and we're still moving in the wrong direction. So we have to take that seriously, but for us to do that, we also have to have an honest debate with the general public.
Okay, great. Well, we're almost out of time, so maybe a final word to Minister Blair and Minister Graham, and what is the most important thing you think the audience should take away from this discussion? And you had your hand up first, and you also mentioned an interesting thing in the green room about some things you're doing in Canada. Don't know if you maybe want to share that with the group.
Well, I think we're all doing some interesting things.
Yeah.
I'm hoping over the next few days that we'll be able to articulate for our colleagues a credible and verifiable path for Canada, and the investments we have to make. I think one of the ways we're finding the smartest way to do that is through alliances. If I just may add just a small point to the last thing, because we've talked about hybrid warfare and asymmetrical warfare, and I think quite understandably at a NATO conference we're talking primarily about Russia. But we are noticing a very significant level of activity directed towards Western societies and Western democracies by the People's Republic of China. In many respects, it is more insidious and more threatening to us. I think what we're seeing is a very overt action to undermine our public institutions, attack our critical infrastructure through various cyber attacks. I think in many respects our response has been, might even characterize it as somewhat naive, because we constantly attempt to defend ourselves from these daily attacks, but I think we need to be very outspoken to our own populations, as you mentioned, how important it is to attribute the activities of hostile nations in their actions against our interest. We're seeing that the Russians do it in a very different way. The Russians are I think, trying to torque up political and public opinion on certain areas, but again, their intent is to undermine the democracies that we rely on, and also to put in jeopardy, I think, our alliances. And so our awareness of that and a very strong response, a united response, I think is the great strength of NATO and the possibility that presents itself here. And that's it for me.
Okay, Minister Graham, final word.
Well, yeah, since we're out of time, I just want a few words on the resilience part, and because we are all strengthening our defense forces now, doing a lot there. That is absolutely necessary, but it still isn't enough, because we have to think about the whole of society. You know, securing the state security, that's one thing, but health security, food security, and civilian resistance is also an important. When we have all of this in place, then we are truly resilient and can be able to defend ourselves.
Well, it's been a fascinating discussion. I've learned a lot. I wish we had more time, but I'm afraid we're out of time. So thank you very much for sharing your insights. Please join me in thanking our